Yes, a hero's welcome for the former president at the Formula One Miami Grand Prix. Just a few hours ago, Trump waved to the crowd and stopped by the McLaren garage one day after Trump sized up the competition for his running mate in November. Now, some of the rumored VP contenders were all on one stage at the RNC spring retreat in Palm Beach, where the Trump campaign and RNC announced a massive $76 million fundraising haul for the last month. Fox News correspondent Madeline Rivera breaks down the potential running mates.
The RNC Spring Donor Retreat this weekend allowed former President Trump to screen some of his potential running mates, but some of the rumored top candidates aren't sharing too many details. Listen here.
So they want to speculate on the VP thing. Here's the good news, and I saw it this weekend. The amount of talent that we have in the Republican Party is extraordinary. He's going to have an extraordinary group of talented people that can serve this country in multiple roles.
There's a lot of names that are in the mix. I'm honored to have my names as one of them in the mix right now. But it is a true testament to the strength of the Republican Party.
Over 400 people coming to support the president and the Republican National Committee. It demonstrates the strength and the resolve. You couple that with poll numbers, and then, of course, the reality that Joe Biden, the master of disaster himself, is the very worst president our country has seen. That is why people are rallying around President Trump. He's going to be the 47th president of the United States.
Meantime, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem's prospects may be in trouble. She's doing damage control again this morning for shooting and killing her 14-month-old dog 20 years ago. The story is laid out in her upcoming book. After killing her dog, she says she also killed their goat.
I want the truth to be out there and to understand that these animals were attacking my children, that we live on a farm and a ranch, and that tough decisions are made many times.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott says he, too, hasn't spoken to Trump about the VP pick.
I certainly expect to have a decision from President Trump in the next 60 days or so, but he did not bring it up. I certainly didn't bring it up.
Remember, Trump didn't reveal then Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate until mid-July 2016. In Washington, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
Oh, the table is so fired up to talk about this one. One thing we are all in agreement of, I believe, is that nobody wants South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to be the VP pick. I think that there is indeed no going back. We could spend the entire hour talking on that, as we have backstage. But I want to talk about the others that are on this list, Tammy. Let's bring up the full screen there. Of course, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, Representative Lee Stefanik of New York, Byron Donalds of Florida, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and still on that list, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. Tammy, which one of those excites you the most and why?
Well, you know, there just needs to be a big red X on the dog killer. There just needs to be. I mean, what's great about campaigns is that you learn about people and that it's a constant scrutiny. They say things that are important, whether they're good or bad. You see how people handle stress, what their character is or lack thereof. So I think that this, again, is what's very important in this regard. But at the same time, we look at those individuals. What we've heard, of course, is that the talent bench is deep. That is true. The benefit for President Trump this time around is he knows what he's getting into. Before he did not. Neither did the rest of us. He presumed, like when you're running a business, that everybody's on the same page and everyone wants success. Not in Washington. So now he knows. And I think we're looking at a dynamic where he expected things from Pence that he did not get. He needs a teammate. This is not a frivolous decision. I'm sure he knows that. And I think he also knows the seriousness of what it means. He is thinking ahead usually for the country. I think I would accept, because I've learned to not second-guess President Trump, whoever he wants, because he understands what's at stake. All of these individuals, with, again, -1, would be fabulous. Also, Sarah Sanders comes to mind. I mentioned Mike Pompeo on Fox and Friends this morning. Some people got upset. But the reality is all hands on deck for this, because we've got a big job, and he's got one term to do it, which means 2.5 or 3 years again, because they'll fight him. But the person who's in that spot has got to be able to be a ringer for 28 and 32.
I think that's important. Guy, I want to go to you because there's a lot of discussion when we talk about VP about checking a box. Mm-hmm. The left needs to check a box. They are married to that box of the things they need to check on it, the DEI list, if you will. On the Republican side, not so much. But is there still some sense of having to pick somebody that's got something, some kind of an X factor beyond just being qualified? And if so, which one of those potentials do you see as being the best fit?
Well, I think the conventional wisdom has been for a while that it's probably going to be a woman or maybe a person of color. I think that game was played by the current president with his running mate, and that has gone very poorly, I would argue, for the country and for him. She has not been an asset, I think, to put it kindly, to that administration. I'm not sure how much stake to put in any of these lists, right? Like, oh, the short list is getting shorter. Here's the 4 names. Here's the 5 names. Here's someone who's rising. I think a lot of this might be a head fake. There's a very good chance that Trump has known all along who it's going to be, or maybe he is really making this decision on the fly. He's got still several months to make it. I'm not sure why people would be upset, Tammy, with Mike Pompeo and his name being in there. I think it makes actually a lot of sense. Yes, he's not checking either of the identity boxes that you're talking about, but look at his resume.
Well, that's the problem for some, is the deep history within the government, which implies that he was able to survive that environment. I think, and wars, but I like him. I think he would fit somewhere very nicely. Well,
he was Trump's Secretary of State. They had a very successful foreign policy. He was a CIA director. He was in Congress. He served in the military.
Yeah.
And I think more importantly than necessarily the resume is the steadiness. I think whoever Trump picks, whether it's, I'm just throwing Pompeo out there because you mentioned him.
Sure.
I think the most important factor for a lot of voters is reassurance. A lot of people are not reassured by Donald Trump. There's people who love him. They're going to vote for him no matter what. There's a universe of people that Trump needs to vote for him that need some extra reassurance, someone who is steady as she goes, someone who is low drama. And I think that type of person is important.
Which, of course, was the impetus for why the genius behind picking Mike Pence. 8 years ago now, is it?
Right.
Yeah, 8 years ago. And, you know, but the beauty of the Trump agenda, the America First Trump agenda, is that the identity stuff kind of goes out the window when everybody is sort of lined up behind it's a pretty simple, clear vision. And I think that if you took out some of the enormously unfair media depictions of Donald Trump and some of the bombast that I guess turns some Republicans off. If you take all that out, these are 70-80% issues for Americans,
right,
like the idea of having a border or having American energy independence. And when you have everybody going in the same direction, like you were talking about, Tammy, with that agenda, I mean, obviously, I do think that it helps to pick somebody. I mean, I think like a Doug Burgum would be a brilliant choice. Somebody who is a sort of a calming influence. That probably is going to help, but the agenda is what matters.
Well, and Trump is such a star that he needs to remain the star. But there was actually an article summing up kind of what we've all been talking about in The Atlantic about Trump's VP search and talking about how it's different this time. His 2024 considerations are less about logic or persuasion and more about personality. It goes on to talk about how he'll want someone who looks good on television, but not someone who might outshine him, as we just talked about, someone who isn't polarizing to the mega base, but who demonstrates range. He'll choose a candidate with experience, or at least with some record of being a winner. He's probably looking for a politician to balance out the ticket. But I want to ask you about this, Tammy, because I think it's important. A lot of voters out there don't like that they have to pick between Trump and Biden. And one of the complaints that comes up more on the Biden side is that they're both older. If you throw somebody in there, maybe like a Senator Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis, you got someone that's a little younger. Sure. Does that maybe help with some of the folks that say we need some young blood in there?
I think that so many big things are at stake, like over 80% of people worried about the economy, that we are now at such an existential point. There are going to be less considerations about who that second person is. And frankly, there is no one in the GOP who would outshine Trump. That sounds like The Atlantic, right? Trying to put on him some narcissism about he's worried about being outshone. By whom? Right. No, I mean, come on.
Right.
So Trump is the man. He has the flexibility now, because it's not now just about the presence of someone who can help him get things done, because it's going to be the swamp against them. DeSantis, of course, I like that idea because he's the talent. He's clearly has a future, but he needs the experience to help him get through that. Even Nikki Haley. I'm sorry, these are talented people, maybe not as vice president, certainly, but
and by the way,
in an important role.
The age thing actually does matter, because generationally that's interesting. But you have two leading contenders who are 77 and 81. People are going to think more frequently about a contingency plan.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real detriment to Joe Biden, knowing who's on deck potentially. And that's something that I think enhances the importance of this decision.
Yes,
ultimately, the most important thing is that Trump picks somebody who can carry on the America First Trump agenda. But also, you are picking somebody potentially for 12 years, not 4 and not 8.
Yeah.
And whoever that is. And it's got to be somebody who's tough, who can go into Washington and not get bullied around by the
Need
swamp.
to be able to call someone up from AAA should they need to be called in. Oh, it was great to see Trump at the Grand Prix, though, I got to say. He's America's president. But a big weekend show is still ahead.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.